Howdy there, folks. It's Geist, and this week we're going to be discussing the TWAB for once. I don't usually do that, but there are some cool changes that I was very interested coming to Destiny. First and foremost, there is something bow related, of course, because you know I can't not talk about bows. There's going to be an Oathkeeper rework, and then there's going to be some stuff happening to glaives and melee as well that I want to just kind of quickly gloss over. Now, to start off, looking at the TWAB here, we're going to scroll way to the top. This week in Destiny, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about any of that stuff. I'm not going to read every bit of the TWAB. I'm mostly just going to highlight some of the cool stuff. So, how melee damage is changing in the Edge of Fate. How melee damage has worked in the past. Well, I'm getting scatterbrained here, but short version, almost all sources of increased melee damage are buffed. All sources of increased melee damage stack at full efficiency in PvE, and we're using additive damage increase calculation for melee damage. Blah, blah, blah. All this really means, all these words here, based on my understanding of it, is it sounds like they're sort of lowering the ceiling for melee damage, but also raising the floor. So no longer are some of the super sweaty players going to be able to stack 30 different things and then one-shot a boss with a melee like has happened in the past. However, it'll be much easier to get much higher melee damage bonuses overall for everybody else that isn't stacking a bunch of stuff. So lower cap, but much more accessible melee damage across the board. And they're actually buffing a bunch of things as well. For instance, glaives are getting a huge buff because glaives are now going to be considered as like a basic unpowered melee. That's what the glaive melee will be. And so their intent for what glaives are to be is to be kind of like the premier keystone in a lot of melee builds. That's sort of what they want their functionality to be, or at least based on what I'm reading here. And it's sort of, and they're going to add a bit of tankiness, like they talked about that in here, where they want you to kind of, you can block and get in and then just sort of beat the crap out of stuff. Now, also across the board, throughout a bunch of subclasses, prismatic, all that good stuff, and on different classes through different exotics, a bunch of the melee bonuses that have been granted have been substantially increased, like 73 to 200%. I don't know what the new melee percentage cap is, whatever that may be. It sounded like they described it like it was a 0 to 100 effect, but then we've got like 200%, 160 stuff that's clearly over that. So there's some other people out there that might understand it better than I do, some math whizzes or whatever. But the point is, overall, this sounds like a buff. Melee damage is going to get a giant buff. And this is almost like a Melee 2.0 is what it sounds like. And so a lot more melee builds are going to be viable, and then a lot of the ones that are currently existing are going to be even stronger. One of my favorites right now is a Winter Bite build. I love to run around and just beat the crap out of stuff with Winter Bite, and it's a lot of fun. Sounds like it's going to get way stronger. They're also going to be changing a bunch of exotic armors. I'm not going to get into every little bit of this. I'm going to scroll down here. Oathkeepers. Oathkeepers have not been quite worth the time investment to overdraw for the damage bonus, so we tuned that a bit for some better ease of use and a higher potential payout of damage. Oathkeepers, increased maximum damage bonus from 150% to 200%. Now provides more of the total damage bonus earlier in the overdraw. Currently, with Oathkeepers, you come to full draw, and they charge up a little bar on the left. And the higher that bar gets, the more damage that it does. Now, I've DPS tested this in the past, and regardless of whether I waited for it to get to the first quarter, half, 3/4, or full, it just wasn't worth it. It did more damage overall to just shoot the arrows as fast as you could. So, with that overall increase in damage up to 200%, and then it being weighted more towards the beginning, which it sounds like it would be, in theory, more front-loaded. So that would mean that hopefully most of the damage bonus happens at the beginning. So we're going to test a bunch of these like timing points here when this change does happen. I'll wear Oathkeeper and try it with a variety of bows, of course, to see which one is the best bow. But before I do that, I want to test the DPS values with me timing it. We're going to try just releasing it as fast as possible. We're going to try releasing it at the first quarter, half, and so on, at different breakpoints to try to see which one is the best at pumping out damage the fastest. And then, of course, like I just said, we're going to try all the bows too. Specifically, I want to try any bow that has Archer's Gambit. I want to try Wishender. I do also want to try Hierarchy of Needs. Hierarchy of Needs is actually slated to be getting a rework. We don't know the details of this yet, so I'm not really going to dive into it. Hopefully makes it less clunky. I don't really have any speculative info there. We'll just kind of let it be what it's going to be. But it's supposed to get some kind of rework. I do believe that Wishender is also getting a very slight rework, although it's not really a rework per se. Wishender and Hierarchy both share the exact same impact stat as that new archetype of bow that we're getting. So as I've already said, I think they're getting shifted into that. So that's kind of why I've especially got my eye on those two, since they're going to be in that harder hitting archetype. We want to test a few different archetypes. I might try to do like a lightweight, a pretty quick lightweight with archers as well to see how it stacks up. So we'll do something like that. A precision with Archer's Gambit, of course. Wishender, Hierarchy, possibly Le Monarch. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll do Leviathan's Breath. We're definitely going to see if it works with it. Currently, Leviathan's Breath does not work with Oathkeeper. I don't know if that's by design or what. They've never really specified, at least not that I'm aware of. So we'll just have to see if that changes with that. Now, I mostly talked about the bow stuff. You guys know that I'm a bow main. So I'm going to do something I don't usually do, and now I'm going to go back, even though I just said I wouldn't, and I'm going to talk about some of the other changes briefly, just for the heck of it, just to see if you guys actually care about me doing this. I don't usually read these TWABs. I usually just kind of do like PvP stuff and bow stuff, but I don't know. We're going to try a change in things. I'm going to start trying to cover a broader array of content. I'm still always going to be your bow guy, don't worry. But for those of you that only cared about the bow stuff, you can tune out now. For the rest of you, I'll go ahead and talk about some of these other things just for my, take on them. And it's going to be a little scattered as usual. Sorry about that, but I am scatterbrained, guys. So, most of this is just going to be melee changes. So like Facet of Courage on Prismatic is getting its melee bonus tuned. I'm not going to really go over a lot of that stuff because that's what all of this is. Any source that increases melee damage bonus is being substantially buffed. So again, melee is just going to be great across the board, but it's because there's going to be a lower ceiling. You're not going to be able to stack as many things and get super high, but it should be able to get you to a certain point much more easily, which is pretty cool. On to our exotic armor changes. Now these are the melee specific ones. So once again, Athrus's Embrace, Liar's Handshake, Ophidia, Triton Vice, Heart of Inmost Light, Peregrine Greaves, Synthoceps, and Spirit of Synthoceps, Wishful Ignorance, Worm God Caress, and Winter's Guile. All of these are kind of melee-centric, and all of them are having those melee bonuses increased. You can see the individual values for yourself if you want to pause and take a look at that. For weapon changes, they're not doing like... This isn't like the weapon changes. This is just melee-based stuff, again, because they're kind of focusing on that first. Close to melee and 1-2 punch, which is a glaive and shotgun perks. Those are getting their damage bonuses boosted for melee. Bastion is going from 100% to 300% on that Saint's Fist PvE melee damage bonus. Same thing for Monte Carlo. Well, sort of. Melee attack no longer deals reduced melee damage to bosses, mini-boss, and champions. I'm guessing previously there was some sort of cap on that. There was some kind of shenanigans happening with Monte Carlo at one point, so it sounds like it's getting put back to its original strength. Winterbite is an interesting one. I know I just talked about how I like the Winterbite build, but since it's now receiving melee damage bonuses from a variety of sources, it's having its overall melee damage tuned down a little bit. This is probably still overall a buff. Winterbite doesn't necessarily get the same bonuses as other glaives. I've never really tested all these values. It's just something that I'm aware of. We're definitely going to take a look at that when it comes out, because as I said, that's probably my favorite PvE build right now, is to just run around with Winterbite and just slam stuff with it. It's fantastic. But they are going to go ahead and tell us the other exotics that are getting changed in a non-melee sense. They'll be doing, I assume, exotic weapons in the next TWAB, I hope, because I'll be excited to talk about that stuff. I'm usually more interested in the weapons anyways. Exotic armor, I don't know. I mean, I'm either wearing Lion Rampant or Ophidian aspects on Warlocks, or I'm wearing Stompies, and I don't usually wear other exotics. So, but anyways, I'll talk about these anyways. Dragon Shadow will now passively increase weapon stability and ready speed. Dodging reloads your equipped weapon, no longer reloads holstered weapons. Activating your dodge ability grants the following effects for a short time. Increased stability and handling, increased move speed, increased slide sprint and ADS strafe speeds, and increased class stat. I don't remember it doing the slide and sprint stuff, so that's pretty cool. Essentially, it'll turn into Stompies after every time you dodge, although better. It's more like a Stompies and Ophidians hybrid. But passively, we're now going to get some weapon stability and ready speed. So I know there's some people that are going to be happy about that for their quick draw builds. Speed loader slacks. Adjusted the tight fit perk. Dodging reloads all weapons and grants increased handling and reload speed for you and nearby allies. While this buff is active, additional dodges increase the strength of the buff and refresh the timer. Dealing sustained damage grants class ability energy. Mask of Bakris. Now this one I did pique my interest. This is a really cool change, and it's something that is long overdue. Mask of Bakris. Effects are now active when either an arc or stasis super is equipped. That is fantastic. So now it gives you a lot more variety. It'll work with any of the arc supers as well. So for prismatic, arc, and stasis, it just gives you a broader variety of builds to use it with. We work to light shift. No longer provides a non-stacking surge damage bonus. Now grants 10% damage for eligible weapons, stasis, arc, and Lord of Wolves per stack. It's interesting. Did it always buff Lord of Wolves? I don't know. You can tell me in the comments. That's interesting that that's specifically Lord of Wolves, though. Stacks up to 3 times, and while active, weapon final blows grant class ability energy. Pretty darn cool. A lot of great stuff happening from Mask of Bakris. That is one of the exotics that I do like besides my main 3, so that would be cool to see how that plays out. Kepri Stink. Removed automatic smoke bomb activation when using a melee attack. Removed true sight when dealing damage with smoke bomb. And added killing weakened targets creates a burst of weakening smoke and returns smoke bomb energy. That one's a little weird. We'll see what happens with that one. It sounds like it's getting more of a PvE focus. I would assume the play loop there is now going to be to throw the smoke bomb, murder whatever is in the smoke bomb, and then it should give you that back. And so instead you'll be throwing it instead of running around punching with it. See how that shapes out. Oathkeepers, I've already discussed that. We'll see how they change. Blight Ranger. Fixed an issue where cancellation damage was not consistently scaling based on voltaic mirror progress. Adjusted voltaic mirror meter behavior. Now requires 25% less deflections to reach maximum. Feels more evenly. Block melee attacks now count as a reflection. Maximum cancellation damage increased by 50%. This is in addition to the fix above. Minimum cancellation damage increased by 150%. Now always applies blind before dealing damage. Updated visuals, audio, and timing of the blinding shockwave to better reflect its impact. I don't ever use Blind Ranger, so I don't have a ton of talk on, or of an opinion on that, but it sounds like a buff. Titan, Crest of Alpha Lupi. Add additional effects. Sustained damage while behind a barricade triggers another smaller healing pulse. Healing your allies grants barricade energy. This right here sounds like some great synergy. And especially effective in, I mean, frankly, PvE or PvE. And I believe, isn't there a Spirit of Alpha Lupi or something too, I think? Yep, down here, so we'll get to that. I would imagine that, and wherever you're at, PvE or PvP, it's just going to make a really good support Titan build. So you throw that, you can heal your allies, and keep getting other healing pulses. I don't know. It sounds pretty cool. So we'll have to see how that one works. Now, it does specifically say behind a barricade. So I don't know if that's going to work with the little dodge heal. That may be something different with Spirit down below. We'll have to check that out. Phoenix Cradle. Updated the VFX on sunspots while the user has Phoenix Cradles to look more clearly supportive to allies. Added additional effects. Dealing sustained solar weapon damage in a sunspot extends its duration. Providing solar buffs to allies has the chance to create a sunspot at your feet. That is fantastic. Once again, more support options for Titans, trying to make the team a little bit tankier. Mark 44 stand-asides. Sprinting with Juggernaut active periodically grants you a stack of static charge. Sprinting while amplified creates an area behind you that grants allies a speed booster. That's interesting. Huh. Lost its role with the introduction of Juggernaut. Okay, well, cool if you like that, I suppose. You can make your allies faster. Path of Burning Steps. This one is actually pretty interesting. Increases solar weapon damage and solar ignition damage based on the number of stacks of Roaring Flames that you have. Roaring Flames, times 1, times 2, times 3, grants 10, 15, 20% bonus solar weapon damage, and 5, 10, 15% bonus ignition damage. Stacks with surge mods. So, all in all, this is just going to straight up boost solar builds with Titans. Using weapons with incandescent is going to be fantastic for this, and they're going to do a heck of a lot more damage. I mean, it's just good for like the weapon's base damage as well as the ignitions that it's causing. So stuff like Tyranny of Heaven, I'm a bow guy, that's the first thing that came to mind. Anything with incandescent. Anything with incandescent that's a solar weapon is going to feel fantastic. Also reduces the duration of suspend, slow, and freeze effects applied to you. I don't remember the suspend thing being a part of this before. Maybe that's something that was the case. It kind of tickled my brain that maybe it was. But either way, that's cool that it is suspend as well as slow and freeze. Abeyant Leap remains a potent choice, but they wanted to add a small nudge in efficacy that won't overtune the whole suspend kit. Now increases the duration of suspend applied by Drinker's Lashes. That's going to be annoying in PvP. Fantastic in PvE, super helpful. Actium War Rig. Auto rifle or machine gun final blows increase their stability, ammo generation, and damage. Stacks up to 10 times. Higher stack counts expire more quickly. Spirit of Alpha Loopy. Healing your allies grants class ability energy. Above changes. Oh, that's getting a little extra. So I don't know. It might still work with the little dodge for Titans, although that might be kind of strong if they are doing like an AoE burst there or something. But it did specify behind the barricade taking damage, so I don't think that's going to quite work. I could also be completely talking out my butt right now and have no idea, and I'm thinking of something else entirely. I don't exactly play a lot of Titans, so y'all feel free to correct me in the comments. Warlocks, Starfire Protocol. Now also activates on radiant damage, which is pretty cool. Blah, 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 blah. Numerous stuff here this time. Okay, yeah, sure. Now activates on radiant damage. Increase the fusion grenade energy gain from dealing damage from 2.5 to 5%. Reduce fusion grenade energy gain from the final blows from 20% to 15%. This seems like a nerf buff, kind of. I assume it's an overall buff. But whatever. Throw more fusion grenades. Wings of Sacred Dawn. This one is pretty great for Warlocks, guys. So, Wings of Sacred Dawn, combatants are less accurate towards you while the Tome of Dawn is active. That is just fantastic. It just means that while you're floating around in the air, enemies in PvE are going to have a harder time even hitting you to begin with. And then you're tougher already using it, so that's just going to be a fantastic effect. Also, while a Solar Super is equipped, Solar Weapon Final Blows now grant restoration and reload your stowed weapons. This doesn't say anything about having to do that in the air. So if you're wearing Wings of Sacred Dawn, then solar weapons are just going to be healing you. I got a buddy that likes using Tikus with this a lot, so he just got turned into a freaking raid boss, especially in PvE. But even in PvP, he's going to have damage resistance, getting healed on kills, and it's going to be granting, just reload stud weapons. So, but even still, that part is great, the restoration on solar weapon final blows. And then, of course, that part for PvE. Fellwinter's Helm. Let's sustain the equivalent on hit. Okay, cool. Added. Powered melee damage weakens targets, so they're giving it an on-hit effect. Applies a 15% weaken. Weaken effects applied by the burst via melee or finisher final blows are unchanged. Okay. Prometheum Spurs. Reworked the perk Embers of Light. While a solar super is equipped, weapon defeats grant class ability energy, and weapon defeats in a rift grant a different solar verb depending on the rift. While in a healing rift, weapon defeats create a pulse that grants radiant to you and nearby allies. While in an empowering rift, weapon defeats instead grant cure to you and nearby allies. A lot of stuff. I don't really use that one too much. When I'm on my Warlock, I'm always on Ophidian. Sometimes I mess with Wings of Sacred Dawn, but not really. Whatever. Boots of the Assembler. Sorry, guys. I ramble a lot, and I'm kind of skirting through this, and I'm ADHD as heck. So just bear with me. Hopefully you're finding this at least entertaining to some degree while I'm giving you the info. Boots of the Assembler. Noble Seekers no longer spawn in waves, and instead spawn at a constant rate based on fireteam size. Okay, that's a huge buff, and that's fantastic. Average number of Noble Seekers produced per 8 seconds is unchanged. It will produce 1 per ally in that time period. Noble Seeker tracking range changed to 40 meters, always, from 20 to 40 meters based on time alive. Noble Seekers will prioritize allies who have not been healed in the last 8 seconds. This is a lot of good changes. Noble Seekers can now target allies standing in the rift producing them. Noble Seekers will not target an ally more than once every 4 seconds. Noble Seekers will not detonate when passing near an ally they are not targeting. They will still detonate if they make direct impact with an ally they are not targeting. No longer grants extended rift duration on Noble Seeker's impact with allies. Instead, grants class ability energy on Noble Seeker impact with allies. This is great. So basically, overall, it sounds like they're improving the tracking and target priority with these things. That's going to be a really good support exotic for warlocks now. Uh, I didn't, I don't use them that much, so I wasn't aware of all the issues that comes with them. But for those of you that do use them, it sounds like this would be pretty cool. And then finally, Geomag stabilizers. Reduce super energy granted by Onyx tracers from 4 to 4% from 7%. Retuned sprinting to top off bolt charge. Decrease bolt charge stacks requiring before sprinting will grant additional stacks from 6 to 5. Decrease the amount of time required for sprinting to start granting bolt charge from 2 seconds to 1. Decrease the rate bolt charge is granted while this effect is active from 1 every 1.5 seconds to 1 every 0.33 seconds. That last one was rough for me to read. I swear, guys, I'm going cross-eyed here at the end. I'm just a country boy. I don't read much. I'm kidding, but anyways, this doesn't really sound like a buff. Watch limiting some of that unlimited power. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it's just a nerf. This one's a nerf, guys. Straight up Geomag nerf. Bungie hates Geomag. That's nothing new. Those things have been catching nerfs repeatedly. They don't generate as much supers as they used to. They're not good in PV. Well, the super itself is not even good in PvP anymore, really. It's just decent as a one-off, but that's fair. It was at least broken. But anyway, guys, I hope you found that at least mildly entertaining. I'm not used to doing this, so just let me know if you're interested in this kind of thing. If you want me to, I might start reading the TWABs. I know there's a lot of other more popular guys, not naming any names, but you know who they are, that kind of read those changes. I just thought maybe I'd give it a shot for once. And like I said, I'm going to try to branch out and cover a little bit more content. Not just bows. I'm always going to have a bow focus because I'm a bow main, but I definitely want to branch out and start doing some other weapons and maybe even some other builds and things like that. But anyways, folks, I hope you found this entertaining. Thanks for listening to my rambling, and I hope you have a wonderful day.